Okay, welcome back. And here I'm doing a little sketch. This is a me drawing to explain to Brett what we were doing. And I looked up and I noticed he was filming. And so I said, all right, cool. Let me just make it a finished drawing then. And so it was funny. I spontaneously just started this sketch just to explain to him how we were making this because we had already started. So now this is about 20, 30 minutes in the past before that last sketch. So we stopped to show him. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting all this framework, but it's all in reverse. I had to keep remembering that I wanted the framework to be in reverse because I'm making a front and back frame for each one of the side tables. And again, at this point you must realize I like using this angle grinder to cut these things. I could use the bandsaw, but the bandsaw puts oil on everything, and it's, everything has its advantages. And it all depends on what mood I'm in. If I don't feel like bending down, I don't use the bandsaw. If I don't want oil on things, I don't use the bandsaw. And it all depends. And a lot of people were inquiring about the pants I'm wearing, and the older fans know that I used to wear those much more often, and I'm starting to wear them again. So I'm actually starting to make them. I'm going to actually start manufacturing them. And they have a lot of little tool holds on the front. That's a magnetic push broom, picks up the metal stuff. This is something I do that I don't see a lot of metal fabricators doing because they're either metal or wood. There's a few people that are both. I make a lot of wooden jigs out of scrap plywood. And it's just to make sure that if I'm making 4 of these frames, I want to make sure that they're all exactly the same. I'm not going to count specifically on my angle grinder. Sorry about that. I'm making all you yawn. So by putting that piece of plywood in there, I know exactly if I have to fill in gaps or trim some of those angle parts. If many of you build stuff, you know that when you do 45-degree chamfers on everything, there's a lot of opinions about what's the right exact spot for some of those pieces to live in. And if their 3 sides are touching that piece of plywood on all 4 of those frames, I know that they're pretty damn close. If I have to fill a gap or grind away some material to get it to fit around that plywood, then I'm happy. So here I'm using a hard stone, and then I'm using a flap disc. So the hard stone is to just get rid of material quick on the Metabo, and then I go to the furred with a little bit of flap disc. So I'm hard grinding and then cleaning up the grind. Hard grind goes quicker. That's a hard disc is what I mean. And just cutting. Now you need 4 of these to connect 4 of the frames. Yeah. And now I'm going to my little notchy connection that I like to use. God, it is about midnight where I am, and I'm tired. I'm shooting all day long with Brad Leone. That's going to be a really funny video when it comes out. You guys will see that on the Bon Appetit channel. But anyway, here we are, back to the table. So you notice I'm connecting the front frame to the back frame. And I did the same thing there. I got that piece of wood. That was the same piece of wood that I used. That was a big, broad piece of wood. I cut it in half to then use it to make sure both of those sides were in the same position. You get what I'm saying? Right there it is again. And I'm using the Armor Tools self-adjusting squeeze clamps, which were great. Thank you, Armor Tools. And so the scrap plywood will sit around. I'll use it for something else. And now these are these beveled corners that separate the whole up, over, and down. And it's really more of a styling thing. I could have just left wood become the up, over, and around waterfall table. But I thought having that little piece of steel at the end showing would be something interesting. And it was important that I put them in precisely, which I didn't do. When you see me doing the woodwork later, there was a few times where I had to stop and cut those steel pieces and bang them back into better position. So that part is done, and now... Woo! God, I didn't yawn all night long until I started recording. And so now I move in. This is a couple of days later. And I'm at the sawmill down the road, and I'm looking for oak. I know where the oak pile is. Oak usually comes in random sizes for some reason. And I'm looking for some couple of good candidate pieces for what I'm about to build. And this is rough sawn oak, and I cut enough pieces to go up, across, and down. So I cut the length long enough to go up, across, and down for each one of these tables. So I need to glue 4 together to make up 16 inches wide, and they're about 4.5 inches. So you'll notice I take a lot off on the joiner here. I take a lot off on the joiner, and then I cut the other side, and then when they're glued together I cut a little bit off more. I ultimately end up at about 4 even looking boards for a 16-inch wide. And this is my severely dangerous joiner. I hear about it from every single person that watches the video. And now this is my saw stop, which isn't as dangerous. And I'm trimming all the pieces, and I'm trimming them to where they need to be. I just have to fall a little bit over 16 inches. So I'm making sure I don't cut off more material than I need. And everyone's going to ask, but isn't the wood going to move? And the wood moves. All wood moves. If it's in the frame, most likely it's going to go skinnier than it will go fatter. If it goes fatter, the wood will buckle. If it goes skinny, there'll be a couple of gaps. But, you know, a couple of gaps never stopped anybody's heart from beating, so I'm not so worried about it. And here you see me trying to glue these pieces of wood together with no biscuits, because I figured the wood really wouldn't be under stress. It was going to be in a frame. It's important to wash all your glue off while you can. Especially this rough sawn wood, if you leave the glue on, it's impossible to get out of those little crevices. So for rough sawn wood, wash the glue off. And so here I'm just darkening the deep grain, and there's my stroke sander. And you can see how quickly the upper portions of paint go away. But it leaves a really beautiful patina down deep in the cracks. Again, that's the second board you could see quickly. This section of my shop's got the worst lighting. And so I have to up the lighting game in this room. But you can see there, the stroke sander really does a beautiful job. I love this thing. I got it, and I haven't stopped using it since I got it. Now you hear it. See, I'm trimming these 2 boards to exactly 16 inches with a little bit of room. A little bit of room. Now I trim a little off one side, and I trim a little bit off the other side, just to make sure the boards are somewhat even looking. Now this is my DeWalt crosscut saw. I paint it white because I don't work for DeWalt anymore at all. I only work for them for a few videos. I never had a yearly contract with them. And a lot of people think that I do, so I don't want them to think that anymore. So here I'm just using this. This thing makes a super nice bevel, although I didn't go deep enough, frustratingly enough, and it's hard to try and find that cut again, so I just said screw it. Let me just use a handsaw that's very dull to just cut all the way through it. And that saw binds up a lot, especially this wood is, the blade's dull, and the wood is squirrely, and I'm cutting an angle across boards that aren't exactly flat. So things got a bit squirrely each time I try to cut. You see all the burn marks in it, and then I had to kind of adjust my bevel and clean up my sharp edges. And there was a lot of work behind the scenes. I make it look quick and easy. Some of them popped right in, some of them needed work. And then it occurred to me, by plunging the saw across the surface of the cut, I got a much better cut. So you'll see what I mean in a minute. So now, some fit perfectly, some needed some work. Now here I am making on the second frame. And like I said, by now I realize that the best way to use that saw on deep, gnarly wood is to just keep plunge cutting it. I found I get the best cuts when I just stick the saw directly into the material. And so I said, let me just do that each time. So I never really pushed the saw along the track because it would just bind up. By just plunge, 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 plunge. And then I got a nice cut. And after the first plunge, every plunge was really just cutting the first couple inches of what wasn't cut until I went all the way across. I have a 36 grit sanding disc on that, grinding disc. It's grinding the wood. There again is the plunge, 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 plunge. And then I cut to fit. Get rid of that. Don't need that. And there you go. I wish I had the craftsman here to tell me. The craftsman. Craftsman. You ever guys listen to the Craftsman? He's got a great voice. The Craftsman. Should explain this like the Craftsman. So I'm drilling holes in the frame, and I'm countersinking those holes. I did it on both sides, but it was kind of redundant to show both. Birchwood Casey Presto Blackener. Birchwood Casey is the company name. Presto Blackener is the product. What did you use to blacken the metal? I just told you. Oh. Well, can you tell me again? Rewind the video. So you see it works on this mill scale. Works where it's ground better than it does on the mill scale. This is Total Boat. This is a water-based. I think this is water-based, yeah. It's a water-based gloss that comes in that bag, which is cool. Because it seals up nice. Like the cans get all cruddy. All cans get cruddy if you don't keep the open edge clean. Here you just pour it out like milk, close the cap, and you're good. Now this is just spray clear on top of the metal. This Minwax spray clear in a can. It's clear polyurethane. And there you see I'm going to start assembling it. And that oak has been dried for a long time. There was, usually when you fresh cut any wood, there's a little moisture in there, but this wood was dry to the bone. I'm not saying that it's not going to expand, but when I cut it, there was no moisture inside the crosscut. So the reason I bring that up is because these screws break super easy in this very, very hard dry oak. And I only broke one screw. I had to be very careful as I came to the end of the screw that I wasn't just going to boink, snap it off. And there it is. Assemble, assemble, assemble. And each one of those panels is very specific to the section it lives in. I had to be careful not to mix them up. Make sure I kept all my layout and all my frame in the same orientation so that I knew the closest one to it was the one that went on one side. You know what I'm talking about. So now I'm making the drawers, and I was going to get all fancy and use plywood, but I was like, might as well just use. These are the cutoffs from the original boards that went around it. And I'm making drawers. Those are going to be the two backs. So you see, those are the left and right side of each drawer, and then the pieces there all the way to the left of the back. Get a clean cut, make a clean cut. It's one drawer, set of drawer sides. And now, that was the ones I just cut were the fronts. Now these are the 4 drawer sides, because they all had to be exactly the same. And I only needed 2 drawer fronts, of course, because there's only 2 drawers. Now everyone seems to think this is very dangerous. I'm just taking little tiny baby trimmings. A couple of people in the comment section said, I'm crazy for doing this. I mean, I've been doing this since I was a kid. I don't do it every day, but when the opportunity calls for it, I do it. It's not a problem. Anyway, so now here I'm assembling the drawers. And I'm just using some 18 gauge nails and glue. Drawer was a little twisted. Now this is the back. If you notice, the drawer bottom will serve to keep all the drawer sides together. This is the drawer bottom now. 1/2-inch plywood. You get 2 out of that cut. And there, just sanding off the burrs. Or I guess, is that burrs? Burrs you'd say for steel. And now a lot of strength is coming out of these drawer bottoms. Glued and nailed. And now we're going to do the same product concept where you spray deep inside of the sawmill lines. And here I'm just palm sanding it off, and you can see it happens right there, straight away. It happens very quickly. I'm going to use soft closers on these drawers, and a lot of people noticed that the soft closers weren't working because off camera, I cut off a piece of the soft closers. I had to make them a little shorter because the soft closers were intended to have a drawer with a separate front on them. So I had to cut off about a half inch each one of the sliders so that they would kind of tuck back, because these drawers don't have a front on them. I should have made the front a little longer. So, and then I had the opportunity to weld them to the original frame, which is something I didn't think of. I thought I would be screwing them all in. When I had the opportunity to weld them in, I was like, let me take the weld. Now, the soft closers didn't close because when I cut off those small pieces, a lot of the grinding went into the bearings. So the soft closers were just a little crunchy. And after having sat for a couple days, now I'm putting on the feet. I did it today, and the soft closers worked. I did spray them with to try and flush them out, WD-40. And they still weren't working, but for some reason today they worked. So a lot of people think the weld might have screwed them up. The weld had absolutely nothing to do with influencing the slow closes. It was everything to do with the grinding grit that got in there, which I didn't show. Boop, you see, push it in. Thank you for this. These are going to be up for auction on boystown.org.